He was employed in a vague personal capacity. While he remained with Cody, he was in turn steward, mate, skipper, secretary, and even jailer for Dan Cody. For Dan Cody sober knew what the lavish doings Dan Cody drunk might soon be about, and he provided for such contingencies by reposing more and more trust in Gatsby. The arrangement lasted 5 years, during which the boat went 3 times around the continent. It might have lasted indefinitely, except for the fact that Ella Kay came on board one night in Boston, and a week later Dan Cody inhospitably died. I remember the portrait of him up in Gatsby's bedroom, a gray, florid man with a hard, empty face, the pioneer debauchee who, during one phase of American life, brought back to the eastern seaboard the savage violence from the frontier brothel and saloon. It was indirectly due to Cody that Gatsby drank so little. Sometimes, in the course of gay parties, women used to rub champagne into his hair. For himself, he formed the habit of letting liquor alone. So it's why Gatsby stays so removed at parties, is because he saw the effect that liquor had on Dan Cody and how it not only made him soft-minded, but easily manipulated. And then it even says earlier that Gatsby was not only mate, skipper, secretary, but jailer. And jailer so much so that Dan Cody trusted Gatsby enough to be able to essentially say, hey, when I'm too drunk, you need to lock me up and keep me from doing anything stupid. And it was from Cody that he inherited money, a legacy of $25,000, which back then was a lot of money. He didn't get it. He never understood the legal device that was used against him, but what remained of the millions went intact to Ella Kay. He was left with his singularly appropriate education. The vague contour of J. Gatsby had filled out to the substantiality of a man. So somehow he got cheated out of the inheritance that Dan Cody essentially gave him by the manipulative woman who may or may not have murdered Dan Cody. But Gatsby was essentially given an education of what it meant to have money, what it meant to sail, what it meant to travel around the continent twice. And so all these kind of refinements that James Gatz didn't have, Jay Gatsby did after the 5 years of spending time with Dan Cody. So even though he didn't get the money, he got this kind of refinement of person. He told me all this very much later, but I've put it down here with the idea of exploding those first wild rumors about his antecedents, which weren't even faintly true. Moreover, he told it to me at a time of confusion, when I had reached the point of believing everything and nothing about him. So I take advantage of that short halt while Gatsby, so to speak, caught his breath, to clear the set of misconceptions away. It was a halt, too, in my association with his affairs. For several weeks I didn't see him or hear his voice on the phone. Mostly I was in New York, trotting around with Jordan and trying to ingratiate myself with her senile aunt. But finally I went over to his house one Sunday afternoon. I hadn't been there 2 minutes when somebody brought Tom Buchanan in for a drink. I was startled, naturally, but the really surprising thing was that it hadn't happened before. So now Gatsby is trying to get to know Tom. "I'm delighted to see you," said Gatsby. Oh, sorry, go back. There were a party of 3 on horseback, Tom and a man named Sloane and a pretty woman in a brown riding habit who had been there previously. "I'm delighted to see you," said Gatsby, standing on his porch. "I'm delighted to see that you dropped in." As though they cared. "Sit right down, have a cigarette or cigar." He walked around the room quickly, ringing bells. "I'll have something to drink for you in just a minute." He was profoundly affected by the fact that Tom was there, but he would be uneasy anyhow until he had given them something, realizing in a vague way that that was why they all came. So the idea is that this woman who had been previously there before was riding out with Mr. Sloane and with Tom, and is like, hey, let's stop at Gatsby's house. And Gatsby, seeing Tom for the very first time, is kind of flustered, and he's like, oh, let me get you something, because obviously, Gatsby's trying to steal back his wife, or Tom's wife. Where was I? Mr. Sloane wanted nothing. A lemonade? No thanks. A little champagne? Nothing at all, thanks. I'm sorry. Did you have a nice ride? Very good roads around here. I suppose the automobiles. Yeah. So obviously nobody's really interested in conversation for some reason. Moved by an irresistible impulse, Gatsby turned to Tom, who had accepted the introduction as a stranger. I believe we've met somewhere before, Mr. Buchanan. Oh, yes, said Tom, gruffly polite, but obviously not remembering. So we did, I remember very well. About 2 weeks ago? That's right. You were with Nick here. I know your wife, continued Gatsby, almost aggressively. Gatsby just has to, sneak that in, right? That's so? Tom turned to me. You live near here, Nick? Next door. That's so? Mr. Sloane didn't enter into the conversation, but lounged back haughtily in his chair. The woman said nothing either, until unexpectedly, after 2 highballs, she became cordial. We'll all come over to your next party, Mr. Gatsby, she suggested. What do you say? Certainly. I'd be delighted to have you. Be very nice, said Mr. Sloane without gratitude. Well, think we ought to be starting home. Oh, please don't hurry, Gatsby urged them. He had control of himself now, and he wanted to see more of Tom. Why don't you stay for supper? I wouldn't be surprised if some other people dropped in from New York. You come to supper with me, said the lady enthusiastically. Both of you? This included me. Mr. Sloane got to his feet. Come along, he said, but only to her. I mean it, she insisted. I'd love to have you. Lots of room. Gatsby looked at me questioningly. He wanted to go, and he didn't see that Mr. Sloane had determined he shouldn't. I'm afraid I won't be able to, I said. Well, you come, she urged, concentrating on Gatsby. Mr. Sloane murmured something close to her ear. We won't be late if we start now, she insisted aloud. I haven't got a horse, said Gatsby. I used to ride in the army, but I have never bought a horse. I'll have to follow you in my car. Excuse me for just a minute. The rest of us walked out on the porch where Sloane and the lady began an impassioned conversation aside. My God, I believe the man's coming, said Tom. Doesn't he know she doesn't want him? She says she does want him. She has a big dinner party, and he won't know a soul there, he frowned. I wonder where in the devil he met Daisy. By God, I may be old-fashioned in my ideas, but women run around too much these days to suit me. They meet all kinds of crazy fish. So, Tom obviously doesn't like the fact that his wife is potentially out of his grasp or doing something behind his back. So it's ironic because Tom obviously is, a cheater and cheats all the time. And then again, you have this idea of these people are on horses and they hang out with Tom, so they must be East Eggers. And to have a horse means you have a lot of money. And Gatsby literally shows his difference in saying, I need to take my car because he doesn't have one of those. And so Tom is essentially pointing out, he's like, one, Gatsby can't associate with us because he doesn't know anybody from East Egg. And two, she doesn't really want him. She's just trying to be polite. And that's something that Gatsby's not necessarily picking up on, at least not yet. Suddenly, Mr. Sloane and the lady walked down the steps and mounted their horses. Come on, said Mr. Sloane to Tom. We're late. We've got to go. And then to me, tell him we couldn't wait, will you? Tom and I shook hands. The rest of us exchanged a cool nod, and they trotted quickly down the drive, disappearing under the August foliage just as Gatsby, with hat and light overcoat in hand, came out the front door. So obviously Gatsby was excited to be invited to one of these parties, and he was ready, but again, they just ditched him because the invitation wasn't necessarily real, at least from the two men, Mr. Sloane and Tom Buchanan. Tom was evidently perturbed at Daisy's running around alone, for on the following Saturday night he came with her to Gatsby's party. So here we go. We have this combination of East Egg meeting West Egg. Perhaps his presence gave the evening its peculiar quality of oppressiveness. It stands out in my memory from Gatsby's other parties that summer. There were the same people, or at least the same sort of people, the same profusion of champagne, the same many-colored, many-keyed commotion. But I felt an unpleasantness in the air, a pervading harshness that hadn't been there before. Or perhaps I had merely grown used to it, grown to accept West Egg as a world complete in itself, with its own standards and its own great figures, second to nothing because it had no consciousness of being so. And now I was looking at it again, through Daisy's eyes. It is invariably saddening to look through new eyes at things upon which you have expanded your own powers of adjustment. So again, he's saying it's the same exact party, nothing's different, it's still grand, there's still champagne, it's still raucous, but now because Daisy and Tom are there, it just feels different. We know that Gatsby has essentially done all of this for Daisy, and this is the first time that Daisy's actually seeing the product of that. And so not only is Gatsby probably looking at it from Daisy's eyes, but so is Nick. And I just want you guys to think about it. It's like when you have an absolute favorite movie, TV show, book, and you just like can't wait to share it with somebody, right? When you're watching it with them, you're even more hyper aware of the movie or the TV show or the experience because you're wondering, what is this person going to think? And I hope that they don't dislike it because I love it so much. I hope they don't judge me because they don't like it. So again, it just adds this complete level of self-awareness that wasn't there before. And now, you have the West Egg standards, as you can see on the screen. You've got these West Egg standards where all of this is normal, all of this is fun, all of this is acceptable, but now you have two East Eggers, one of them in which all of this was for coming in, and it's like, will this meet up to their expectations or will it fall drastically short? And what is that going to do for the rest of their relationship throughout the novel, right? Because this is a crystal clear image of what Gatsby is offering to Daisy. Daisy, if you come away with me, if we continue our affair, this is the life that you could have. And the worrisome thing is, what if she doesn't want it? And what if she doesn't like it? They arrived at twilight, and as we strolled out among the sparkling hundreds, Daisy's voice was playing murmurous tricks in her throat. "These things excite me so," she whispered. "If you want to kiss me any time during the evening, Nick, just let me know and I'll be glad to arrange it for you. Just mention my name or present a green card. I'm giving out green." "Look around," suggested Gatsby. "I'm looking around. I'm having a marvelous—" "You must see the faces of many people you've heard about." Tom's arrogant eyes roamed the crowd. "We don't go around very much," he said. "In fact, I was just thinking, I don't know a soul here." So again, Tom is insulting him and saying, well, I don't recognize anybody because they're not of the crowd that I hang out with. And obviously Gatsby not even letting Daisy finish I'm having a marvelous. He's saying like, you must know people, right? Like, please like this, please like this. "Perhaps you know that lady," Gatsby indicated, a gorgeous, scarcely human orchid of a woman who sat in state under a white plum tree. Tom and Daisy stared with that peculiarly unreal feeling that accompanies the recognition of a hitherto ghostly celebrity in the movies. "She's lovely," said Daisy. "The man bending over her is her director." He took them ceremoniously from group to group, Mrs. Buchanan and Mr. Buchanan. After an instant's hesitation, he added, "the polo player." "Oh, no," objected Tom quickly. "Not me." So again, that was Gatsby's subtle way of saying, Tom, all you're ever going to be known for is the fact that you're a polo player. So it's a subtle dig at him. And Tom doesn't like that because he says, "Oh, no, that's not me." And he says something a little bit later that will prove that. But evidently the sound of it pleased Gatsby, for Tom remained the polo player for the rest of the evening. "I've never met so many celebrities," Daisy exclaimed. "I liked that man. What was his name? With a sort of blue nose." Gatsby identified him, adding that he was a small producer. "Well, I liked him anyhow." So again, notice who's there. It's not foreign dignitaries. It's not politicians. It's celebrities. And celebrities are very clearly new money West Eggers because all of their money comes from what they do with their career at that moment. So again, it's a lower class than what Tom and Daisy are used to associating with. And so then Tom says, I'd a little rather not be the polo player," said Tom pleasantly. "I'd rather look at all these famous people in oblivion." Daisy and Gatsby danced. I remember being surprised by his graceful, conservative foxtrot. I had never seen him dance before. Then they sauntered over to my house and sat on the steps for half an hour, while at her request I remained watchfully in the garden. "In case there's a flood, or a fire," she explained, "or any act of God." Tom appeared from his oblivion as we were sitting down at supper together. "Do you mind if I eat with some people over here?" he said. "A fellow's getting off some funny stuff." "Go ahead," answered Daisy genially. "And if you want to take down any addresses, here's my little gold pencil." She looked around for a moment and told me the girl was common but pretty. So Daisy is essentially saying, like, I know that you're probably going to cheat with me, so here's a gold pencil to write down addresses so you can. So again, it's a subtle dig. It's a not so subtle dig. She's saying, like, I know what you're going to do. Here you go. Do it. Because she just doesn't care anymore.